Okay, so now let's talk about the real estate cycle. Okay, so let's first talk about what I would consider the normal cycle. Okay, so this is when kind of like the most common form that the cycle takes because historically populations have increased. There's been economic growth. So when these two things are kind of in place, then you're going to see this normal cycle kind of take place. Okay, so let's go through the steps here. So the first one is that demand increases. So why does this increase? We're gonna talk a lot more about the demand side of real estate in the next video here or in a future video. Um, but basically, it's you can just see here some basic kind of common sense things. If you have more people are going to need to be housed, and so that's going to kind of uh, increase demand. When there's economic growth, people have more money to spend. They're going to shop more. uh, There's going to be more businesses that start. There's going to be more office space that's needed. So economic growth also leads to uh, an increase in demand. So whatever real estate assets exist, housing, office space, retail, uh, there's now a greater need for it because of more people, because of more economic activity. So once that happens and the demand increases, then you're going to see an increase in the rents. Okay. So when there's more people fighting over a limited amount of stuff and that demand gets more competitive, or when demand increases and that competition becomes more fierce, people are going to start paying more for things. Okay, so it's going to cause rents to increase, and this is true not just for housing. Again, this is true for warehouse space. So when e-commerce started becoming a bigger thing, where people were buying stuff online, warehouse space was kind of limited. And so as companies started shifting more towards needing more warehouse space, uh, whatever warehouses existed, the rents for them would go up because people were willing to pay more because so much business was happening online and the companies needed that warehouse space. They were willing to pay more for it. Okay, so that demand increase is gonna lead to rents and prices going up. Uh, Not just rents, but like to buy a warehouse, right? Companies are willing to spend more because they needed it. So as this happens, developers, the individuals and companies that take raw land or take existing properties and repurpose them and build new structures, all that kind of stuff. They see this happening in the market that rents are going up, prices are increasing, and they start doing their calculations. They say, hey, the land costs this much, the cost of construction is this, the cost of all the other, the architecture fees, government fees, etc. Now, if I can rent the finished product out for this new higher rent, okay, it's going to be worth it for me to build. Okay, so you're going to see as the rents increase, these developers are going to start kind of getting more active. They're going to start doing the calculations because now it's going to, at some point, tip where it's worth it for them to basically start the construction process and add more supply. So when that happens, development starts ramping up. So there's not just one developer in the world, it's a very competitive space. So a lot of competitors, developers who are competing are going to see this and they're going to be like, okay, I want to start building. I want to get my supply on the market as soon as possible to capture these higher rents. Okay, so development starts ramping up, um, construction starts happening, and eventually uh, supply is added. Okay, so this construction pipeline takes a while. Okay, for housing, it can take several years from the start of the process where you acquire the land through the time that the new structure is actually ready for new occupants. Okay, it can take a long time. So, but eventually it happens and supply is added. Now that that supply is added, now there's more kind of supply available for this increased demand. And so rents will flatten out and potentially even start dropping. So in Austin, Texas, from 2023 through 24, there was a huge building boom. And even though a lot of people are moving to Austin still, and the demand is increasing, the supply response was so aggressive in Austin that prices or rents actually started declining. Okay, so at some point when the supply is actually added, the rents and the prices will taper off, and depending on how severe the supply response was, could even start dropping. And as that happens, the profit potential for adding new supply is going to also decline or taper off. Um, and so the developers will eventually stop because they're like, it's not worth it to now take on a new project. The rents and the prices are not sufficient to compensate me for taking all the risk of doing all the work and putting the development together. So that will stop. And so you kind of get back to this steady state until demand increases again, and the cycle kind of repeats itself. Now, there's also times where there's a distress cycle. Okay, so this happens when there is a decreasing population, economic distress, and since real estate is such a localized thing, even though you may see a normal cycle playing out across a country, the distress cycle could be playing out in certain pockets within the country. Okay, so these cycles are worth knowing because within the markets you care about, uh, it could be playing out. Okay, so what happens in the distress cycle? Well, first, there's less people. There's economic distress, so more people are without jobs. Um, there's less economic activity, and so the first thing that happens is that vacancies increase. Okay, so let's say uh, let's take restaurants space for example. So as people stop eating out more because they don't have as much income, restaurants start going out of business. The spaces available for restaurants starts growing because the restaurants that occupy them are gone. Okay, so vacancies start to increase, inventory starts increasing. Okay, um, as that happens, the supply of all this stuff, if it's residential, maybe people have left. Uh, Workers can't pay as much rent because they're not making as much. Rents and prices are going to decline. As that happens, they're going to keep declining, keep declining until there's some equilibrium that's reached. Okay, so there's some market clearing level. So at some point, rents will drop to a point where people can't afford them. Okay, and basically, this will be the steady state of things until demand increases, and then we kind of jump over to this cycle. Okay, so uh, there are times where this distress cycle lasts a long time. Like you can argue Detroit, Michigan is still maybe in this phase now. Okay, there was some kind of hope that it was going to jump into here, but maybe in certain pockets of the city it has, but really, a lot of places you can argue are in this distress cycle for a long time and kind of stagnate. Okay, so and then it takes leadership because you can get this to jump to here through good leadership, people that attract jobs. Like if you have a mayor or a governor who's really aggressive about attracting people and jobs to a certain area, uh, you can kind of jump out of this into this because again, to go into this normal cycle, you need more people. You essentially need more demand. Okay, so as long as you can increase your demand somehow, you can jump into this kind of other real estate cycle. Now, there are times also where the entire country or economy is in the distress cycle because of big economic disruptions like what happened in the 2008 financial crisis. So it's not like this distress cycle doesn't happen, but if you just look historically, population has historically grown. uh, the GDP in the US has pretty consistently gone up over time. If you look at a graph of it, it's increasing over time. There are, of course, periods of time where there are recessions and it drops, but over the long run, it's mostly been this situation of increasing population and increasing economic activity and GDP.